Let's talk about ad hooks. We're on the second facet of the diamond. We're moving on from images and into our ad hooks. And ad hooks are persuasive text that causes the reader to buy. Now, because we're writing books, a lot of our persuasive text it comes from our books. But if we were selling shoes, we would be trying to look for a story to tell about shoes. Or jewelry or whatever. So, because we're authors, some of this is kind of built in, but ad hooks are not necessarily verbatim from your book. They rely on the trope, they rely on your story and the conflict in your story and the cool stuff in your story, but they're all about aligning to the market and appealing to the reader. We are no longer attempting to be true to your story. We're attempting to signal to the market why it is that this story is the thing that they need to read. It's a really important distinction. The biggest mistake that authors make at this point of the marketing process is they think that they have to be literal. My heroine has blonde hair, so the picture I use, she can't be a brunette. I have to find a blonde. Or, well, that's not what happens in the story. Or, I'm going to give a really detailed bit of information to the reader and that's going to cause them to convert. There's often a disconnect between what is selling books and what's actually in your book, but because you're in the arena of your genre, you can market based on what the market wants. Your book just has to be in the arena. The market wants a home run. It's waiting for the point to come in from the runner to cross the home plate. But your book can be up in the nosebleed section and it still counts. And so you have to let go of the story inside your head. And now we have to look at communicating the story to people who will want to read it. And those signals can be very different. As an example, I wrote a romance that talked about spontaneous human combustion. That is never going to be a thing that causes people to buy my book. It can maybe raise some curiosity and heighten some interest, but that is not something that's going to really be effective in my marketing. And I know that because whenever I talked about it, there were just crickets. So you have to sell the experience that the reader is looking for. Remember that books are an emotional experience for your reader. That is how you have to persuade them to buy. So your ad hooks are all about figuring out what it is about your book that gives readers the experience they're looking for and making sure that that is signaled very clearly in the words you use as well as your image. So for ad hooks, you need to build a library of text. There's some elements of a good library. The first is you want to get some good reader reviews and you want to get some excerpts of those, some snippets from reader reviews, something very short, one sentence max. And if you can just use part of the sentence, even better, nice and short, get about 3 of them ready to go. You need a one sentence teaser. It's like a tagline, but usually you want more conflict and more buzzwords, and it doesn't have to necessarily encompass the entire story like taglines often do. It can just be about the heightened tension of the inciting incident of your story or the moment of high impact. I once started an ad, which actually we're going to look at, I believe, with the sentence of, "I can't stand vampires." And that was compelling because of all the context that was in the ad and with the image and the audience and all of that. But that, even just something like that works. So it's meant to have a lot of conflict. And "I can't stand vampires" was good because my audience was vampire readers, which they're not used to seeing a negative like that in their newsfeed. They're used to seeing the handsome vampire wants to hump me into eternity and give me, his blood. They're used to seeing that stuff. And I was coming in with a very different kind of ad hook, and it definitely was interesting. We'll do it as a case study later, okay? Because there was some interesting things there. Here's an example. Come into the woods and howl. I like this tagline or this one sentence teaser. It has absolutely nothing to do with my book, but it deals with my genre. So your one sentence can be about genre. It can be totally about the tropes. But I've seen a lot of people go and do things like, give me a trope. I'm trying to think of a trope now. Friends to lovers, for example, or second chances, or enemies to lovers. And they sit there and they just very plainly say the trope, which is fine. I mean, that's not horrible or anything, but it's not terribly evocative. It doesn't really capture imagination. And so here I am kind of signaling my genre in a way that's really calling to mind a lot of image. Plus, it has a double meaning. Come, howl. There's some sexual connotation there that the Puritan bots are not even going to notice. So I'm going to be just fine running this ad. And the image then comes in and reinforces. And there's a nice little synergy there. As a reader, in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words in one image, I've told you exactly what kind of experience you're going to get. And I've used words that put images into your head, as well as sort of that subconscious understanding that it's going to be sexy. You need 2 to 3 one-paragraph snippets. They need to have a very strong opening line, a very strong ending line. I will have some examples for you. 2 to 4 long excerpts between 500 and 1,000 words. Same thing, strong opening line, strong ending line. You want to go in and punch up the language as much as possible. For both the one paragraph and the excerpts, you want to have high sexual tension if you're selling romance. If you're not selling romance, it'll be a moment of high interest or high conflict, heightened conflict in your story. You don't want to have actual sex scenes, as we'll discuss in a minute, but you want that moment of wanting, that moment of he looks at you and you see that the romance is budding, the first kiss, the lead up to the kiss can work. Nothing too explicit, though. Rewrites are good. Like I said, punch it up, add buzzwords, add tension, make things more interesting, more visual. The reader is not going to read your stuff, then buy the book and complain. That doesn't happen. So take the time to sit there and make your snippet or whatever it is you're presenting as amazing as possible. Sometimes the changes you make will go into the book. You'll realize, hey, that really works. Sometimes they're a little too markety and ad copy-ish, and they're not really right for the book. Or the energy of the scene before and the scene after won't work with what you've done, so you don't put it in the book. But for ad copy, for ad hooks, yes, make it good, make it sizzle. And this again goes back to this disconnect where people think they have to be super literal. You just need your ad hooks to be in the ballpark. That's it. They don't have to be the most faithful representation of your book ever to be made. All right, it's not, you're not lying to people. It's still truth in advertising if you're just evoking emotion around your genre, around tropes, around things that readers are looking for. That still counts. You're not doing anything bad. Put all of your stuff into a Google or Word doc, save it. I usually do the title with the words Media Kit. So when I'm searching, I can search for Media Kit and it'll pull up all of them. And I put everything in there, including my buy links, and I save it. And I use that with bloggers. I use that with people who do social media marketing for me. And then I use it to make ads. Oh, let me back up. This should be part of your writing process. So you have to sanitize everything for the Puritan bots. You absolutely will find that your account will get shut down. So you can't do sex scenes. You can't have gore. You can't have negativity. You can't have violence. No swear words. You just got to be really, really careful. You don't want to have your ad account shut down. It goes back to what I was saying in one of the image videos where when you're first starting out, you're going to season your account with really super safe stuff, okay? But as you're working on these snippets and excerpts, you're going to rewrite so that you don't get flagged. So the key to sanitation The key to warding off the Puritan bots is coded language, euphemisms, metaphors. You can use dashes, but I don't recommend it because the bots eventually will catch up. I'd recommend that instead you shift your language around a little bit so that it's more oblique to where you actually have to have a human brain to understand what's being said. Come into the Woods and Howl is a great example. Homework. So get your ad hooks ready for the books that you want to run ads for. I suggest that you select a freebie and a paid book so that you're ready to go. Eventually, this should be your SOP for every book you write. As you're editing, you should be highlighting snippets and excerpts and one-liners that you think are really evocative of your work. We're going to workshop our one-liners, our snippets, and our excerpts in the group on the post designated for those. I'll make a post for each one. Remember that when you're giving feedback, when we're workshopping each other's stuff, we're trying to make it compelling so that it signals to the reader the emotional experience that they're going to have. And also we want to help people sanitize it so they're not getting in trouble with the Puritan bots. Once you've done that, go back to the images you've been selecting and assess for a good or bad fit between the images and your words. And I also want to say this does get easier and faster with time. I know that it took a long time to probably find all the stock art that you wanted to use. That was probably a big time suck. Finding stock art is always bad, but now you got to go through and find all of these snippets and then you got to workshop them. And I know it's a lot of time. Don't get frustrated or discouraged. It gets faster because eventually you've integrated the snippet thing into your writing process. So as you're editing, you're automatically saving things into a doc so they're ready to go. You'll eventually have run enough ads and have enough experience with images. You will have a full stable of images that you can use with different books so that convert, that will work. You'll develop an eye or an ear for both images and snippets. So you'll get faster with practice and time. It just takes some hard work in the beginning to learn the skills that you need. So don't think that the time suck is forever. It's not like this the whole time you're running ads. You do get faster.